Welcome to Real Life Beyond Faith, where a formerly Christian, currently atheist couple takes a deep dive into the experience of life after deconversion. This is episode 7. I'm your host, Jenica Creel.
And I'm your host, Patrick Creel.
So this has been kind of a crazy week for our country. It seems like half the country is on fire and the other half is flooded, or at least a lot of the country is flooded.
Yeah, can't catch a break.
I'm really sorry for those of you who had to flee your homes and deal with all the issues and inconveniences that come along with that, not to mention the fear of losing your home or having it
or your loved ones.
Right. And not knowing what you're going to return to. Our hearts just go out to you for that. I can't even imagine it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what the heck is going on. I don't know if this is related to climate change. I would imagine so.
Well, according to Kirk Cameron, it doesn't have anything to do with climate change. It's all because God wants us to be reliant on him.
And humble.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you didn't see that video, it's just repulsive. And I know that narrative so well, too.
Yeah.
In fact, his humble and dependent on God narrative is very similar to what I thought God was telling me when I was really upset and stressed out about my sexuality and my inability to squash it. Because I actually went to a Christian conference and just broke down in tears because I just felt defeated. I could not turn my sexuality off. Imagine that. And I was on my knees crying, and I felt like God told me that he purposely made me weak in that area so that I would be humble to make him look strong. And watching that video that Kirk Cameron did, I was reminded of that, and I was just thinking, no, that's absolutely asinine. And people are experiencing a really difficult time and facing the loss of their home, the loss of life, the loss of their pets, all of this incredibly
just
traumatic
devastation.
stuff. Yeah. And all he can say is, God is just testing you. He just wants you to be humble. That's just repulsive. But anywho, we did want to mention that you can donate to Foundation Beyond Belief. They have a disaster recovery fund set up for both Harvey and Irma. If you go to fbbgive.org, you can pick which hurricane disaster relief you want to donate to. Takes you right to the page. Super easy, super fast. You can just throw anywhere from $10, $20 to $500 their way.
Or your own amount.
Yeah, any amount that you want. And that money will all go towards the secular disaster recovery that these people need. They don't need to be given Bibles. They don't need to be proselytized to. Man, I can't talk tonight. But what they do need is they need help. They need shelter. They need food. All of the essentials.
To put into perspective, this is saying that there's 7 million people in the U.S. currently without power, and 192,000 people in shelters across the Southeast just because of the hurricanes.
That's mind-boggling.
Yeah. And not to mention in the Caribbean, the islands are reporting up to 95% of their structures damaged.
My God.
They got hit the worst.
Yeah, that's insane. We keep talking about the U.S. because that's more close to home. That's more relatable. But they experienced some major, major tragedy in the Caribbean. So yeah, go to fbbgive.org and throw a few bucks their way. It goes a long way to help. And it's a hell of a lot better than sending prayers or thoughts. on a brighter note, we wanted to give you a little update on Ethan, our 5-year-old who just started kindergarten. And
Now, this is his first. Well, last week was his first semi-full week. They had off for the holiday, but
yeah, in one of our past episodes, we had mentioned that he was about to start school, and I was nervous. I actually, oh my gosh! So the day that he started school, I did not expect this, but I was so messed up, like just wrecked with anxiety. I did not expect that to happen. But I was so wrecked with anxiety. I later in the day ended up taking an anti-anxiety pill, which I usually don't do, and I'm not used to the effects. But I took one like right before I was supposed to go pick him up from the bus and then go to work. Well, it it knocked me out. Like I drove down the street to the bus stop and I was thinking, there's no way I'm driving to the babysitter's house. I ended up having to have Patrick call me off of work because I was so messed up. But yeah, it was super weird. Like I thought that I would be just fine because Ethan, he's relatively independent. He's a social butterfly. There's really not a whole lot of reason for me to.
yeah, and he was really excited about it too.
Yeah. But I think it was just watching him walk into the school and knowing that if he becomes overwhelmed or upset, there was nothing I could do.
Right.
And that's a long day. That's 9:20 in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was just thinking, oh my gosh, like what if he feels the same way that I did when I went into public school? Because I remember just every day being just wrecked with anxiety every morning when I was walking into that big high school, 2,000 students. He's not doing that, but I think I was internalizing it.
Right. And his school wasn't that big.
Yeah.
But
it just reminded
new,
me, though.
And he's a kindergartner, so it's definitely new and can be a scary experience for the little ones, but
Yeah.
he seems to be taking it really well. Like, he's really enjoying it. And he's learning a lot. Like,
Yeah,
he's even teaching Jameson stuff that he learns in school.
Yeah, it's so
He's like
cute.
teaching him songs and stuff and like different letters. He's a good big brother.
Yeah, he's amazing. Oh, and he already has a girlfriend.
Oh my gosh.
He
Yeah.
came home the first couple of days telling me about this girl in his class that he became friends with. And then, I don't know, like a few days into school, he switched from using her name to just calling her his girlfriend. Like, I don't even know where he got this idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he has a little girlfriend, and he was telling me the other day that his girlfriend was telling him that he should come over and hang out sometime. I'm like, oh
Yeah,
my
and he
God.
mentioned the one night that he wanted to like go over to her house or something to play or yeah.
I'm like, you're 5 years old, child.
Yeah, we're gonna be in trouble.
It's too early for that. But it's really cute. And he seems to be thriving.
Yeah. He loves it.
It surprised me that I was reminded so much of my public schooling.
And that it affected you that much.
Yeah. I didn't expect to be so wrecked I'd have to call off of work.
Yeah.
I don't call off of work unless I absolutely have to. That was intense. But anyhow.
Speaking of work.
Yeah, right. So I was thinking about something this week, and I was talking to one of my regulars at work even. If you're not familiar with that term, it just means someone who like frequents a restaurant or a bar or whatever.
And they usually get the same servers, same bartender.
Yeah, just they like to have the same atmosphere, drink the same drink every time they come in and stuff like that. Well, I was talking to one of my regulars, and I was explaining to him like why I put up with sexual harassment while I'm bartending, which is extremely common and extremely often. And I was thinking, why do I put up with it, Because in my real life, I usually don't. Like, I'll usually, either ignore the person
Just brush it off or
or
confront them.
yeah, or like politely confront them and stuff, because I don't want to risk my safety over it. That's another concern that you have as a woman is
That's ridiculous that that's even a concern, that you have to worry about your safety, not getting raped, not getting kidnapped, because
or even just like having someone lash out at you
right
in a public
because
place
you
and
don't
like be obnoxious.
because you don't agree with the way they're talking to you and treating you like a person.
Yep. It is really sad.
Ridiculous.
It is a fact of life, though, and if you're a woman, you probably know what I'm talking about, especially if you're in the food industry or customer service or anywhere where you're dealing with people, basically. Nurses also face this a lot. But on Friday night, I was bartending, and a couple of guys came in, and the more drinks they had, the more...
Of course.
Yeah, the more explicit their quote unquote compliments got. And it got to the point where I was like pretty uncomfortable, but I was just kind of like laughing it off and, being my normal, like goofy self and not really encouraging it, but just kind of going along with it. It's kind of part of my job is the problem. Like, my job is to, make the customer happy,
To a point.
to a point, yeah. But I was thinking, the stuff that they were saying was inappropriate. And in my normal life, I would have confronted them. But in my working life, I just let it go. I made $50 off of those two guys. And it made me realize, like, I was putting up with it because I knew that I would get a payoff, and that payoff would be taking care of my family. And so I just deal with that. It is exhausting, though.
Yeah.
Like, to have to deal with that kind of behavior from men on a regular basis. And it is regular. And it's not just young guys. Old guys are sometimes worse.
Yeah, I mean, I semi-frequently go in there to visit. I'll bring the boys in, we'll eat, and, while you're working. And I will observe people, like, around the bar and, like, how they interact with you and, what they're watching and stuff like that.
What, you mean watching my ass?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, you'll turn around to go do something,
Oh,
I'll see them.
And they don't just watch it. They tell me that they are.
Yeah.
They make me nice and uncomfortable.
Right.
So I can't just do my job and feel like safe and comfortable. I'm being told every time I go back to them, like, that they're... Oh, like this older guy the other day, he's like, can you feel these eyes following you? I'm like, yeah, well, I can see them following me too. I even said that. I was like, yeah, I saw them following me. Thanks. I'm feeling super, super comfortable. But yeah, like I was telling my regular, who I think is just a very respectful, very kind guy, that it's just exhausting to deal with it. And he's black. And so we were talking about the race issue too. And we actually had a really great conversation about race and about, what it's like to be a black person in America, especially like right now in this climate. And I was thinking, like, a lot of what I have to put up with is what black people and Hispanic people have to put up with on a regular basis, where people are making them feel very uncomfortable. They know that what the person is saying is coming from a place of racism, but in order not to make a scene, they just brush it under the rug.
Or to not get shot by...
Well, yeah, that too. Like, just the whole, like, safety thing, the whole, like, not wanting to create a scene, not wanting to,
endanger their lives, endanger their family lives.
Yeah. So, like, people who are marginalized, like, minorities and women, we put up with a lot of stuff, like a lot of like very overt
Yeah.
stuff. That night too, those two guys who were like kind of sexually harassing me, they started saying stuff to him too, and like very racist comments, and that's what we were talking about, which led into the whole sexual harassment thing. But it's so sad because they walked away that night without a clue that what they were doing was absolutely inappropriate.
Or even if they did have a clue, they just didn't care.
Right, and they could get away with it because they were middle-class white men.
Yeah.
And they knew that they could come into a restaurant and take advantage of the fact that I can't speak up, that I can't like risk my job or whatever. I mean, I could have, but I'm not about to risk my job over, confronting a couple dumbasses at the bar. It's a real pity. So if you're a guy out there, just be aware that just because you're at a restaurant and your server can't, tell you if they are being made to be uncomfortable, or they, might choose not to in order to, keep their tip and all that. Just be aware, like, don't take advantage of that. Don't hit on a girl when she's serving you, because she has to respond a certain way. It's not genuine.
Yeah, I was going to say...
there's no way to know if it's genuine.
Yeah. I was going to say that, chances are they're probably not actually hitting on you. They're probably just putting up with it so that they can, get through the shift and, get a decent tip.
Yeah. Yeah, some of us will be like extra friendly to the point of seeming flirty because we want your money. That's why I'm at work. That's why I do what I do. I want to pay for my family. I want to pay my bills. I want to put food on the table. I will do what it takes to make that money. But that doesn't mean you have a right to sexually harass me. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Just be a decent human being to other people.
It's a lot harder than it seems, apparently.
Yeah. One last update we want to give you is our audio issues. We've been dealing with, our equipment and, learning the whole process of recording and editing and making sure it sounds professional. So, we do have some issues here and there, but we're trying to work those kinks out. So, like I said in one of the first episodes, one of our taglines could be "Bear with us." So, yeah, bear with us.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest problems is that we have really cheap, crappy mics. And so the editing process is so much harder because we have to cut out static. We have to cut out little clicky noises. We're having to do all kinds of stuff in post to try to make the audio sound at least a little bit decent. And in the process, sometimes it sounds echoey or distant. And you've probably heard that in episode 5 and episode 6. So we're working on that. We're trying to save up to get a couple of nicer mics, but as usual, that costs money. So if you want to help us get to the point where we can get those mics and get a nicer sound quality, you can go to patreon.com/reallifebeyondfaith and become a patron for as little as $1 per episode. It helps us out huge. For you to do that, to support us and help us cover the costs of recording and publishing our content. And also, equipment. Yeah, the equipment. We have a very simple, cheap mixer. We'd like to upgrade that at some point too. All of these things will just make it a more enjoyable listening experience for our audience, and that's something that we really want to give you guys, especially for our patrons who are paying for this content and helping to support us. I feel an obligation to give you the best quality stuff that we possibly can. And it stresses me out to no end when our audio is sounding like crap and I listen back to it and I'm thinking, this needs to be better. I really want it to be better. So please.
So thank you to all the current patrons who have been helping us out so far and have pledged. It's been a huge help.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll thank our patrons at the end of the episode and give a shout out to one of our patrons who actually increased their pledge this week, which we greatly appreciate.
Yeah.
But this episode, we're actually going to do a question and answer episode.
But before we do, we are going to hear about a couple of our friends and their podcasts.
Have y'all ever wondered what it's like to be a redneck with empathy? Have you never heard of a Southerner who isn't a blathering bigot? Well, have I got the show for you. It's the Podunk Polymath Podcast, hosted by myself, Chris, and it's the sentiments of a secular, sarcastic, screwed-up Southern SJW and skeptic. You can find me and the show on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or your favorite podcatcher. Y'all stop on by and take it easy now, okay?
Hey, all you listeners, I'm Robert.
And I'm Amy from Secular Yakking.
And we just wanted to let you know that if you've got 30 minutes to kill,
Then we're the podcast for you. We're just some old married couple who's been yakking at each other over the many years.
and we thought we should start making it so you can listen in on our yakking.
We dig past the mainstream and bring you the news that you may or may not have heard about.
We take a look at politics, religion, science, and pretty much anything we feel like yakking about and sharing it with you. And let us not forget our weekly Mr. Potter Award.
No, we're not professionals on anything we talk about, but we love to yak about stuff and give you our opinion on the matter.
So tune in at secularyakking.com or check out our feed on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and anywhere good podcasts can be heard.
And who knows what craziness will happen.
Yeah, just like this.
So this week we reached out onto Facebook and we asked the people what they wanted to hear us answer, what questions they wanted to hear an answer to from our perspective. So we do have a list of questions that we're going to try to go through and
Yeah, this is going to be a Q&A episode.
Yeah.
So we don't have like a picked out topic, but we just have a bunch of questions that people submitted to us. So thank you to those of you who submitted questions. We appreciate that. There are some really good questions in there, some that I had to really think about.
yeah, it's going to be hard to answer.
Yeah, but we'll do our best. So thank you.
All right, the first question we got was from Justin Krebs. Justin says, what are your feelings on taking your kids to church or letting your family take your kids to church without you? With or without you, I guess. This one can be tricky.
Yeah, I don't know that we have like a definite answer on this one. We've kind of gone back and forth on it. We have let the boys go to church with Patrick's parents on several occasions. The main thing is that we talk to them afterwards.
Yeah, and when they do go to church, it's when we visit my family in Pennsylvania, so it's not very often.
Yeah, like we don't go out of our way to let them go to church with them. But if we're visiting for the weekend or something and they want to take them to church and put them in the Sunday school classroom and stuff, I have a little bit of an issue with it just because I don't know what's being said in there, and I can most likely guarantee that I don't agree with it. And I don't want Ethan or Jameson to internalize any of that, especially since their brains are little sponges right now.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked to Ethan after Sunday school and asked him, what did you learn? And, did you learn about God? And what do you think about that and stuff? And he most of the time doesn't even remember what he supposedly learned.
Yeah, he mostly just remembers he has fun there.
Yeah, and he
has
plays
a
with
good time.
toys and other kids and stuff.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm not too worried about it. I think the biggest thing is, first of all, what kind of church it is, because some churches are worse than others as far as like the indoctrination and stuff. Some churches are very chill and like kind of contemporary, laid back. Some churches are extremely progressive even. With those churches, I wouldn't worry too much, especially if it's like a Unitarian Universalist church or Methodist or, the ones that are pretty chill and not fundamentalist. And I'd say, yeah, like let your kids go, just talk to them afterwards. Communication is like my answer to everything.
Right. Just talk about it.
Yeah. If you just talk about it, then, it's fine. I think the biggest thing, especially as they get a little bit older, is I want my kids to ask a lot of questions. I want to encourage them to doubt, and I want them to know that doubting is a good thing.
And that they can ask us questions and not necessarily like just in general and like on their own or with their friends or whatever, but they can openly come to us with questions.
Yeah. And I want to encourage them in ways like how to think rather than what to think. I don't want to tell my boys there is no God. I want them to come to their own conclusions on that issue. And I will love them and support them no matter what conclusion they come to. But I want them to learn critical thinking skills. I want them to ask hard questions, and I want it to be theirs. I don't want them to be indoctrinated. I don't want them to be afraid. I don't want people to use fear tactics on them. So if I ever get any kind of feeling from like Patrick's parents' church that they're teaching about hell or talking about hell at all, then absolutely not. My children are not going to Sunday school. I don't think that they talk about hell in that Sunday school. I mean, that's something that you could maybe talk to the Sunday school about, like before you even put your kids in that. I mean, that's an awkward conversation. Like if your parents want to take your kids, their grandkids, to Sunday school or something, like in our case, it would be a really awkward conversation to say, well, do they talk about hell? And like, that's,
Yeah. They usually don't with kids that young, at least. It's usually like, the lighter Bible stories.
Right. Like the supposedly fun stories, like where God drowns the whole world and where a whale eats a man.
Yeah.
Fun, like happy stories. So yeah, I mean, there's that issue too, where the Bible stories aren't necessarily like hunky-dory. I think it just depends. It depends on so many factors, so I can't give like a definite yes or no answer. All I can say is that in our situation, for now, yes, we'll let the kids go.
Yeah.
That was a rambling answer to that question. Sorry, Justin. And our conclusion was, I don't know.
Yeah, just talk to him.
Yeah.
I don't know, just talk to him.
I don't know, just talk. Yeah, we could just cut all of that and just say, I don't know, just talk to him.
Yeah, we'll do that. Then you might be confused.
You want to go on to the next question?
Yeah, moving on to the next one. From Rich Kemp. How do you answer your children's questions? And have you had any questions from your children yet regarding religion?
Mostly about death, which isn't really completely related to religion.
Yeah.
Ethan asks a lot of questions about death, and he'll ask, what happens after you die? And I'll tell him, well, you just become a part of the earth again. Some people get buried. Some people want to be buried and have a tree planted on them, and they become part of a tree. Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah, but when do you become a zombie?
Yeah, so real serious.
Yeah. Well, to him, it's a serious question.
Yeah.
Like, honey, zombies aren't real. He's like, you mean like God? Yeah, zombies aren't real, just like God. Basically, in his mind, zombies are similar to ghosts. God is similar to ghosts.
Yeah. how do you answer your children's questions regarding religion? I guess we just try to give objective answers, things that make sense to them, that doesn't overwhelm them, confuse them, but also kind of lead them on, like what do you think?
Socratic method.
Right. Like, what do you think about this? Does this make sense?
Yeah, I ask Ethan a lot of questions. Like, I mean, I'll even ask him point blank sometimes, like, do you think that God exists? Like, have you heard people talk about God? He's like, I don't know, probably not. And we'll just kind of have like very simple discussions about it. The thing is at this point they're 5 and 3.
Yeah.
So we can only get so in depth, and half the time we're talking about zombies and monsters.
And Minecraft.
At the same time we're talking about like God and Jesus. So, I mean, at least I know that he's thinking about the God question in the same sense that he's thinking about other mythical things. And he's realizing that the idea of a god with magical powers is pretty similar to some of these other mythical ideas and creatures. So I just want to encourage him to think about these things and come to his own conclusions. But at this point, I mean, he's only 5, so his conclusions are, you know,
pretty basic.
Take them with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
As they get older, though, we want to make sure that, like I said, we teach them how to think, not what to think. So we'll just make sure that they know that they are free to come to their own conclusions and that we'll love them and support them no matter what.
Our next very serious question comes from Stephen Cunningham. He says, what is Patrick wearing?
Patrick is currently wearing a red shirt with trees in a city and some white comfy shorts.
Gym shorts.
He's looking pretty darn handsome.
And comfy.
Thank you, Stephen, for your very serious question. We appreciate that.
Here's it's not really a question, it's more of a prompt. This one comes from Stuart Pauly. He says, I would like for you to discuss the hurricane situation with Joel Osteen. This was in Houston, and why religious institutions are not really to help the people they congregate, but to be financially profitable. And what he's talking about here, if you guys aren't aware, is with Hurricane Harvey hitting Houston. This is where Joel Osteen has his megachurch, and his church is a converted basketball stadium. So
ginormous.
It's huge. And during a time of need in the hurricane, a bunch of people were displaced from their homes. They don't have anywhere to go. The shelters are filling up. People are looking to the churches to open up their doors to let people in. And because he has a mega church, he should be able to let a lot of people in.
And
easily.
people were coming to the doors and being turned away.
Yeah. Now, I haven't seen exactly what the final outcome was, but there were reports saying that they were dealing with, flooding issues themselves. There were reports saying that they never actually did turn people away.
I might know a little bit more information about this, so...
Fill us in.
Okay. So from what I've gathered, they were turning people away because they were claiming that they were not accessible due to flooding. However, people who were in that area took pictures showing that there was not flooding that was blocking off the church, and that it was definitely accessible. There were other pictures showing like some flooding like near the church, but not necessarily blocking it off. So there were contradicting reports. Also, something that I heard was that they took a picture of a flooded basement and posted it showing that there was flooding in the church's basement. It turned out that that picture wasn't even of that church's basement. It was another building in the area. I don't even know how they got this picture, if they like went to that place and took a picture of their basement, or I don't know. And plus, this is like secondhand information. I heard it from another podcast. I mean, a podcast that I respect, and I would assume that they've done their research, but just take it as, secondhand information. But the fact of the matter is, it took a nationwide outcry for Joel Osteen, a man who is worth millions of dollars,
Has a ginormous mansion.
to open up the doors of his church. His excuse was, one, that it wasn't accessible because of flooding, which turned out to be a lie, and two, because the city didn't ask him to. Really? You need the city to ask you to open your doors and to help people in a time of need? This is a perfect example of the prosperity gospel at work. You only do well if you are good enough with God. You only get blessings if you are good enough with God. It's total bullshit. Number one, it's a disgusting way to look at the world. Number two, it's not even biblical. Like, this isn't even Christianity. Like, if you're
Sounds like
gonna
the
get into
Pharisees.
if you're gonna get into doctrine, this isn't even biblical doctrine. It's repugnant. It's disgusting doctrine. And then on top of that, being greedy and not sharing your resources. I mean, this just is like, it's a revelation of who Joel Osteen is as a person. And I hope that it makes more people realize that he's a fraud and he is a con artist.
A charlatan.
Yeah. And once they finally did open the doors to their church, they passed around a goddamn collection plate. And they posted on their website and stuff that they needed people to donate to help them take in these refugees. No, you don't. You have
You're there for
millions of
support.
dollars.
Yeah.
Sell that stupid mansion.
And private jet.
Yeah. And help these people who are in need. Like, it just disgusts me to no end.
And I saw he was doing an interview, and he looked like just like super uncomfortable about the fact that people were in his church, and he was just like kind of like looking around, bouncing around, and
Because he's a snooty little snob who doesn't want people messing up his church.
I bet he thinks a camel can fit through the eye of a needle.
I bet he can. I bet he does think that. Getting all revved up.
So to answer your question, Stuart, yeah, we think he is doing this just, for the money and not to help his community.
Yeah. But as far as churches and congregations in general, I don't want to generalize and say that they are all greedy, that they're all just like out there looking for money and fame. Not all of them are. We were a part of a couple of churches that just had absolutely phenomenal people in attendance in these congregations. People
and in a nice part of town where people had money.
Well, not even that though. Like the church that you and I went to when we first started dating, like they weren't made of money, but they were wonderful people who wanted to do good in the world.
Right.
And so I can't generalize and say that they're all the same. Prosperity gospel is on a whole new level of being awful, but a lot of churches are, they're opening their doors. There were some Jewish synagogues that opened their doors, Muslim mosques that opened their doors, people in the religious community doing wonderful things. So I can't generalize it, but you don't have to be religious to do great things and to open your doors.
Right. I was I was bringing that up because a couple of churches that we did attend were nicer churches. They were bigger churches, but they still weren't like mega church status. They still didn't have that mentality of we're just here for the money. Like they actually did things. Like they were charitable.
They did fundraisers for organizations that help with like human trafficking
and they were huge turnouts.
Yeah, like orphanages in Africa and stuff like that. They would rake in donations from people, thousands upon
Hundreds
thousands.
of thousands.
Yeah, tons of money for these organizations that did incredible work. Some of the organizations may have been proselytizing, which I am against. I would rather that money go to secular organizations. But the fact is that they were doing something good, and it was out of the goodness of their hearts. They were humanist Christians, and I think that's fantastic. And I want to encourage that as much as possible. And I don't want to demonize those churches who do really good work in the name of God or in the name of faith or whatever it is. As long as you're doing good work, you're a humanist, and I'm behind you.
Right on. So open your church doors and let the people in.
Let my people in. All right. So then the next question was from Deepak or Deepak. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. He says, to whom do atheists thank if by chance they got saved from a hurricane or lightning? That's a really great question, Deepak. I would say it's more of an attitude of gratitude. I feel like I should start rapping. It's more like just a general sense of being thankful or grateful, whether it's, thankful that we have the scientific or the technology and the science to be able to predict these storms or, actually view them from satellites and know that they're coming and be able to prepare for them. If we didn't have that science and that technology, we would just be suddenly hit by these storms and there would be countless casualties. So I'm grateful to science. I'm grateful to the minds behind these technologies that we have now that allow us the time to prepare. I'm grateful for the people who step up and help. I'm grateful for the humanist efforts that go into disaster relief. So it's really, there are so many more things to thank than some God who allowed the disaster in the first place. If there was a God, we would have to believe that he allowed this to happen in the first place. And then he saved a person here and there, allowed one building in a neighborhood to remain standing, or a statue of Mary
to what about all the
to remain standing as all the photographs are burned and the and the whole house is flooded and the pet is dead. Die. It's kind of ridiculous to think, oh, well, I made it, so praise God for this. Well, that seems like a very conceited thing to do. I would rather be thankful to the real people, the real help.
And the people who are actually helping afterwards to help clean up and rebuild and, tend to the injured people.
Yeah, absolutely. Our next question comes from Eric. Eric asks, has losing your belief in God or a God made you more progressive? If it has, why do you think it has? Another really great question. It absolutely has made us more progressive.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's because once we realized that we were wrong about one question, which was like the biggest question for us in our lives about the existence of a God, it made us realize that it's possible we're wrong about other things.
Right.
And so we started reanalyzing everything and questioning everything. And started to realize that a lot of the things that we were opposed to were strictly because of our faith and because of doctrine, and not based on anything actually morally objectionable. So, for instance, homosexuality, there's literally no reason to be against it except for religious reasons, or because you're just, a divisive, discriminatory person. But in general, as far as morality goes, if it's not hurting somebody else, if it's not even affecting anyone else except for you and your love life, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. So, that was like the first thing that we're just like, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
homosexuality is fine.
Yeah, because we mentioned even in a previous episode, like we had a few gay friends that we worked with, and like we knew them personally, and we knew they weren't bad people. Like, and it gave us cognitive dissonance about how we felt about them and like what we thought about where they would go.
You mean after death?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
they'll go to the same place that all of us go.
Yeah.
Into the ground or wherever else. The other thing that I realized that there was no like moral objection to would be transgender folks.
Do they even mention that in the Bible? Transgender?
I don't think so. Like they talk about eunuchs and stuff, but I don't think they talk about transgender.
Yeah.
But because people believe that you're made in God's image and that He made you exactly how you're supposed to be and stuff,
And for
then
you to
they
go change it.
Yeah, then they have a religious objection to it because God wouldn't make a mistake. Well, I mean, that's flawed on so many levels, but it just like based on my new way of looking at ethics and morality, I look at it and I think, does it cause harm? No, it doesn't hurt anybody. I mean, it hurts them because people are just discriminatory against them. But as far as like just the concept in general of somebody coming to the realization that they are not in the correct body for their gender, that doesn't hurt anybody else. It's something that they have to come to a conclusion about, that they have to figure out their identity, and then everybody else just needs to respect it because it doesn't hurt anybody. And so I was able to open up my heart a lot more and be accepting and understanding to people a lot more once I pitched these religious ideas that God doesn't make a mistake and that if He made you male, you're male. Or if He made you female, you're female, and there's no in between. Now I realize that gender is very fluid, that it's possible that you have the wrong body. If you're born male, you may have the wrong genitalia and the wrong body for who you actually are as a person. And there's scientific evidence to back it up.
I saw a good question posed pretty recently. It was just a Twitter thing, but someone was saying, like, if you were in an accident where you were maimed, say you're a male and your genitals got maimed to the point where they had to be amputated, would you still be a male? And the point was, no, your gender is not tied to your physical.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
That made me think of another point too about being progressive is it was kind of surprising to find out that atheists can be more charitable and giving towards people in need than religious people, which is kind of weird because Jesus was all about helping the needy and just being good to people, and yet the Republicans, who are typically religious, they're against, helping people out. They're against,
Socialism.
right, welfare, stuff like. It's just they seem to be very resistant to charity and helping people out.
Yeah, and greedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a very interesting aspect. Plus, there's the narrative in our country that religious people are the only ones who are charitable and who donate and who
Yeah, and it's just
do
not true.
missions trips and things like that. We found out very quickly that that wasn't the case, that it's not only religious people who do that stuff, and that, in fact, people who are not religious actually have more of a reason to do those things because they can't just sit back and say, oh, I'm praying for you. They realize, I can't help you unless I do something tangible for you. And so they tend to be very generous. And even if they don't have a lot of money, they still have a strong desire to help in whatever way is actually a tangible, practical way.
And it's typically more genuine because they don't have this thing hanging over their shoulder that they should help or they need to help. They're doing it because they want to.
Right. Yeah, they're not
They wanna
doing it
help.
because they want more jewels in their crown in heaven. They're doing it out of the goodness of their heart, for goodness sake. And I feel like that means so much more and carries so much more weight. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And I have not become any less generous as I've become an atheist. In fact,
More so.
I'm more generous. And I give more of my money. I give more of my time.
Resources.
More resources, more of my energy, like just in general, like as far as activism goes and things like that. Like, I feel like this is the one life that I have to live, and I better give it my all. And I want to make it a better place for my children and my grandchildren and the generations that follow us, because this is all we've got, and we need to make it last, and we need to make an impact in whatever way we can. I want it to be a better world for my children. It's not looking great right now, but we're doing our best.
Right on. So it's looking like we have a decent amount of questions, and we are running about usual time. So let's answer, a couple more questions, and then maybe we'll do a second part and answer the rest of these questions, because there's some good questions in here.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to skip over any of these questions. So we'll do a part 2.
Yeah.
But this is pretty cool. Thank you guys so much for submitting so many questions.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting even for our own selves to kind of talk through this stuff and like
remember, certain things and
like even just like come to our own answers about some of the
Right.
stuff that maybe we haven't even thought about yet.
So our next question comes from Christopher. He says, how did you meet? And did your beliefs in God influence how you dated and where you went, etc.?
This will
Okay.
probably be the last question because that one's a pretty loaded question.
Yeah, that's true. And his next question is too, so. How did we meet? We met at Olive Garden. We were both working at Olive Garden. It was kind of funny because I started working at Olive Garden when I was in high school in Pennsylvania. Jenica was living in Ohio. And when I went to college in Ohio, in Kent, I ended up transferring to another Olive Garden to make money while I was in school. Well, turns out Jenica was working at Olive Garden as well.
Yeah, I was working at the one he transferred to.
Yeah.
So I was a server and he was a dishwasher. Usually those two positions don't mix too well.
See, the thing about dishwashers is people don't usually like to talk to them because they're like the lowest position in the restaurant. So, people, drop their dishes and move on, or, throw their silverware in the water and splash all of us and get us all dirty and gross and just move on.
Well,
Not
and
much interaction.
the dishwashers tend to hate the servers for all of the pet peeves that they have, as far as like the splashing of the gross, nasty water, setting their dishes down like still dirty, like all these things that servers do that is just like inconsiderate and rude. And the servers don't give a shit. They're like in a hurry and they just like throw their stuff down and take off.
So if you're a server, be nice to your dishwashers.
Yeah.
They put up with a lot of crap.
Yeah. But yeah, that's where we met. And the way we got started talking is because, first of all, I noticed this hunk of a man carrying dishes into the kitchen, and I had to do a double take.
Likewise. We both noticed each other.
In my mind, I was thinking, why on earth is this hot ass dude hiding back here as a dishwasher?
Choking on my spit. All right.
I was like, he needs to be out there as a server making the big money. But it just wasn't something that he wanted to do. He liked the ease of being able to just go in there, mind his own business, wash dishes, clean up, go home.
But it was easy.
Yeah, and he didn't have to deal with people. And so when he told me that, I was like, yep, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Because you're probably a lot less jaded than I am. It's so hard to be in the restaurant business or customer service or anything and not walk away from it jaded and like hating people.
So one of the things that got us, talking in the first place was music and concerts.
And our shared interest in the type of music we listen to.
Right. There was a concert that I wanted to go to that was at the school you were going to at the time in Akron.
Chevelle.
Yeah, Chevelle. And I was bummed out that I couldn't make it, and I found out that you went.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, man, I wish I could have gone. And so we started talking about that.
Yeah. And then what really piqued my interest was when you asked me about the missions trip that I was going on.
Yeah. So you had an envelope sitting next to one of the registers, like by the office, and you had flyers in there, talking about, your missions trip and what it's about and asking for money for support. So I took one of those and I took it home and was checking it out.
And you were thinking, oh, this chick's a Christian.
Right. Like, oh, sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. So you asked me about that, and I, gathered from that conversation that you're a Christian. I asked you if you were going to any churches around here. You said that you weren't, but that you had looked and you just didn't find anything you liked and stuff. But it was encouraging to me to find out that you were a Christian, because that meant that you were someone that I could date. And
I met the criteria.
Yes, you met my Christian criteria. Because I didn't believe in being unequally yoked. Even if I thought someone was hot or that they were compatible with me, I would not date them unless they were a Christian. Like at that time, I had actually kind of gotten a crush on this guy who I found out was a Jehovah's Witness. And so I wasn't willing to date him because I definitely would not date him. Or what? So I wasn't... We're just going to keep that. No, we're just going to keep that.
Scratch that cut.
I sound like a moron. I'm okay with it. Anyway, I wasn't willing to date someone who didn't have like at least very close to the same beliefs that I did. Because the Bible told me to. So finding out that you were a Christian, I was like, oh my God, he's hot and he's a Christian. But I had just come out of like a very heartbreaking situation. I wasn't necessarily dating the person, but I talked about this in a past episode. We were just kind of like talking and fell in love, but never actually dated because he didn't get a sign in the sky saying that he was supposed to marry me. And I was very, very hurt and upset about that situation still, and still in love with him. So it was kind of bad timing, but it was definitely one of those things where I was like, okay, this has some potential because I think he's awesome. He likes the same music I do. He seems like an awesome person. And he's a Christian and he's hot. Did I mention that he's hot? So yeah, that was us meeting. And then the second part of the question, how did our beliefs influence how we dated? Well, that's actually an interesting thing, because we did start dating, but at one point when we were dating, I started to realize I was dedicating a lot more of my time to Patrick and a lot more of my interest and my love to Patrick than I was to Jesus. And I was feeling very convicted about that, feeling like I wasn't as in love with Jesus as I needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to a small group meeting with the singles group I was in church. And I talked to my pastor about it and a girlfriend of mine. And I told them that, I didn't feel like I was giving everything to God, that I was putting so much energy into this relationship. And they encouraged me to break up with Patrick. And
bunch of jerks.
Well,
surprised we're here together, so
yeah,
it worked out.
But based on like what they believed and what I believed and stuff, like according to our religious beliefs, I should break up with Patrick and put Jesus first. So I broke up with him at one point, and it was devastating to both of us, and we had a really hard time. And then during that time that I was broken up with Patrick, one of his really good friends died, his friends from high school, and I was not there for him. Maybe we'll talk more about that in a future episode, because that really, really makes me mad and upset that I was not there for him for that. And I even wrote a blog post about it. But, long story short, we ended up back together because we decided that, God wanted us together.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the fact was I just could not live without him.
Yeah.
Once I knew what life was like with him, I didn't want to spend my life without him. So it only was about a month that we were broken up, and I did not go a single day without longing for him and wanting him. I tried desperately to spend my days in devotion and prayer. But in the end, you still won. I still loved you more than Jesus.
I'm glad you did.
Me too.
It's like we said, that was going to be our last question, so I think we're going to wrap it up here.
Yeah, we'll pick up with Christopher's next question in our part 2 of our Q&A.
So check us out next week.
We're going to be trying to get our episodes out on Thursdays. Be a little bit
lenient.
Yeah, be patient with us, because as we're trying to figure out our audio issues and editing and trying to find time between being parents and working full time and everything else, it's a little bit more of a challenge at this point as we're new to this. But Thursdays are the goal. So it should be Thursday, Friday, or Saturday that the episodes will be coming out.
So just keep a look on our Facebook page. We'll post it there to keep you guys updated. So
that's facebook.com/reallifebeyondfaith.
We also have a Twitter, right?
Yeah, our Twitter handle is @RLBFpod. You can also email us at reallifebeyondfaith@gmail.com. And you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/reallifebeyondfaith. If you become a patron, it helps us get closer to being rid of these audio issues. So we really appreciate that. Plus, just in general, the support means a lot to us.
Speaking of patrons, we wanted to thank one of our special patrons, Justin Krebs, who increased his pledge this week. And because he did that, he gets a special shout out. So this week, he would like to give a plug to Atheist Fight Hunger. They're taking donations between now and when PastaCon is on, and that's October 13th through 15th. That's in Pennsylvania. And they will be using the donations to buy bulk food They'll be packaged as meals by attendees on the last day of the con. So far, they have raised $920. Their goal is $10,000. So there's a bit left to raise to meet their goal.
Let's give them a bump, guys.
In 2015, they raised $7,575, and that ended up feeding 30,300 people. That's at 25 cents a meal.
Holy crap.
That's a lot of people.
That's awesome.
That can be helped. So they reached 7,500 in 2015. Their goal this year is $10,000. So they're trying to feed at least 40,000 people, which is kind of a good thing.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So, yeah, check them out. The website is atheist.org/donations/atheist-fight-hunger. We'll put it in the show notes.
I was going to say.
It'll be
in the show notes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Justin, so much. We really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And also your
He's
encouragement that you've given us about the podcast so far. It means the world to us. We're really glad that people are listening and enjoying hearing our story so far. So thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, Justin.
So there are a couple other patrons that we want to give a shout out to who are at the level on Patreon that allows them to have a plug at the end of every episode. The first one is Rich Kemp, and he would like to plug Recovering from Religion, which is a fantastic organization that both of us are involved in. Me and Rich, that is. We're both helpline agents. Fantastic organization where you can go to the website and call the helpline if you are dealing with questioning your faith, or you've recently become an atheist, or you're an atheist who is experiencing a difficult time. Just whatever your situation is, you can call and they will help you work through it and deal with the issues. They have tons of amazing resources. So the website is recoveringfromreligion.org. So feel free to visit there. If you think you could be an agent, a helpline agent or a chatline agent, then you can hit the volunteer tab when you go to the website. It's a pretty simple process. They walk you through everything and they give you the training that you need and everything to get started. So please check that out. The other shout out we would like to give is to Thomas Smith, who is also a great friend of ours. And his podcast is Serious Inquiries Only. A lot of you are probably familiar with him and his podcast. It's a pretty prominent one within the secular community. And in his podcast, he does some critical thinking about the questions of science, philosophy, skepticism, and politics. He does a fantastic job of trying to take a non-biased approach to some of the current events that are happening. He brings on people to interview. He gets great listener feedback that he responds to. He's just a very level-headed, very skeptical mind in our community. Someone who I trust to get my information from because he does such a great job with his research. So please check out his podcast, Serious Inquiries Only.
Do it.
Yeah. You can go to seriousinquiriesonly.com to find the podcast, or anywhere that you can find your favorite podcasts.
So I think that does it for our show this week. Thanks for listening again.
Yep.
You guys are awesome.
We'll see you next week for part 2 of our Q&A. But in the meantime,
keep it real.